advertise Santa Rosa. Good morning, everybody. I know it's not on this morning's agenda to start this way, but I'm going to ask that we start out with Pledge of Allegiance to our flag, and prior to that, a prayer. If I could, Sheriff, would you mind coming up and praying for us this morning? Say a prayer, and then I'll ask Commissioner Salter to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please rise.
Lord, thank you for another day in a great country and a great county. We appreciate the blessings you've bestowed on us as a county and as a country. Please look over us and our proceedings and help everybody make the right decision that's in the best interest of everybody. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge to our nation's flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Don. Good morning, everybody. Commissioner Williamson had to be out of town, so it's my privilege this morning to lead this morning's budget workshop meeting for Tuesday, July 18th, 2017. I believe this will be our final budget hearing. This is our final budget hearing, I believe. Our budget workshop. Budget workshop. Or
it's the only one we have scheduled at this point.
All right.
After. Go ahead.
All right. Well, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the County Administrator, Mr. Gomillion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is our budget workshop for our FY 2018 budget. As you know, we did have a sort of a pre-budget discussion in our annual workshop back earlier in the year, just to sort of set the course for where we wanted to go. And so what I'll do this morning, at this AM session, we have the constitutional officers with us. We'll before we turn it over to them, we'll just kind of talk through the overall budget and the general picture. And then this afternoon session, we'll have the BOCC departments and that budget, those responsibilities. We'll talk about those other funds this afternoon. So we have a PowerPoint we'll start with, just it'll help us walk through the general presentation prior to, I believe the sheriff would be first up when we get to those presentations. Okay, next slide. Of course, the purpose of today's budget workshop is really to discuss the FY 2018 tentative budget. You have been provided that budget is online for the public to view. We'll talk about the revenues and expenditures and the request, and then hopefully at the end of the day we'll get guidance from the board relative to the moving forward, getting us obviously to our two final public hearings that we'll have in September. Just some key points that we'll talk about. We kind of hit on some of these back in our earlier pre-budget type annual planning process, but also a few other items in here. We want to thank our staff for their hard work in helping to prepare this budget. All those that participate in this process, our constitutional officers, other departments, in their participation in trying to pull this budget together. We do have some, as you have been made aware, and we recognized our budget office a week or so ago. They received the Budget Presentation Award this past, were recognized for that, and we continue to look to improve on that presentation. We have tried to make it clear in listing these funds by function in a way that hopefully it is easier for the public and those that don't use this document on a regular basis to understand. This proposed budget maintains the current millage rate at 6.0953 mills. The funding for capital needs is provided both from our capital fund and from the LOST fund. The majority of our capital funds this year are coming from the LOST fund. You'll find that document, that capital budget in sort of the back of the tentative budget document. We have merit increases included in this year's tentative budget. As this board has previously determined, we have the $1.6 million that was appropriated to provide the 10% raises for sworn law enforcement officers. And in this budget, I don't have any new BOCC positions that are ad valorem dependent. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but you know, really I have held this year, I don't want to hamper our meeting our needs currently, but I'm also very well aware, as you are, about the pending FY or the fiscal year 18 referendum on ad valorem. And so I want to position us as best we can to be prepared for that, as well as we struggle with our both attracting and retaining employees. So I'm really concerned about being able to continue to be a place where people want to work and see a future. I'm some concerned that as we move forward, obviously the more positions we add, the more weight we're carrying, the less likely we are to be able to maintain a merit system. And so for that reason I have, and we'll talk about those positions this afternoon more. Any upgrades are on hold pending the completion of a countywide salary survey. We will be talking about that more in the future, but we have held on any requested upgrades. We had a number of those. As you know, we have both class-wide issues in some of our entry-level positions, and we have talked with a number of other counties that have had successful surveys performed, and we'll be trying to move forward with that. We'll talk about that when we talk about HR this afternoon as well. One bullet point I didn't include in this slide I should have mentioned. We continue to try to advance in our use of technology. We'll talk some about that this afternoon during our budget discussions as well. That is the one way that I think we're able to maintain a certain level of customer service with a static level of employees, given increasing demands. Now, as we all know, you can only do so much with technology. Technology doesn't clean out ditches, and it doesn't do other things. It doesn't go pick up bad dogs, but it does help us in our tracking and efficiency of how we do what we do. Next slide, please. We'll just run through some of those slides that you are familiar with from historical. This is just kind of the history on the taxable property values in our county. And then this is the same over time. Okay. Just a quick slide. I get the question from time to time about ad valorem, the ad valorem number. Of course, the recommended budget is a little over $76 million at the current millage rate. If you just factored in what it would take to meet all demands and you fulfill that with ad valorem with a millage increase, then it would the 78,419, which was requested, would require 6.3535 mills. Yeah, that's just an informational slide. That's the millage history timeline that you're familiar with. And then our slide that depicts the population growth as it is compared to the increase in ad valorem collections. And you can see the trend there that continues where our population sort of outstrips our revenue growth in that area. Our other major revenue sources would be, as you see, our state shared revenue, our sales taxes, and we get most of these numbers are coming from the Department of Revenue, the state. We are seeing, for all fuel taxes, we're seeing at least a projected decrease, and we assume, I don't know that they affirm that is based on consumption. I think that probably is not a new phenomenon across the country with the more efficient vehicles. Then your electric franchise fees are another source of revenue. You see that number, you see that distribution of funding to the departments that funding is provided to. Then the constitutional officer budgets, this is a listing of those budgets. Obviously, the Sheriff's Department is the big budget compared to the others, and we just note here what those changes are in that. In the Sheriff's budget, we basically the increase in personnel operating is about an increase from FY17 adopted budget was about 2.3, and then about 2.7 million in capital needs is funded from the lost. Okay. Then this is the capital budget listing here for, and you see the source of that fund. Some of those capital budget funds will be from a general fund, just those things that could not be funded from LOST funding. About $3 million for the sheriff's office, and then $30,000 to the supervisor of elections. Okay, that's it. That pretty well kind of tees up our lead in for the budget discussions, and I believe the sheriff is up first to discuss his request. I will say, as he's coming up, I appreciate them working with us as we went through this budget process. His requested budget is different than what we have recommended. I believe he's requested 19 personnel, an increase of 19 total, and he'll talk about that. What we recommended, going back to the numbers I've already provided you there, is a total of a 2.3 million increase from FY17. 1.6 million of that, of course, was committed at a prior action by this board, and we did not designate all of that money to what it would be for, depending on the board's decision, discretion. It would be up to the sheriff to tell us how that money would be allocated, personnel or otherwise. Appreciate it, sir.
Sheriff, again, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. Good to be here. And as Tony said, I think our differences came out to be around, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, around 750 to 800,000 was the difference between what I requested and what you submitted.
Jane, do you know?
Is that about right?
Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Okay. Okay, if we can start the slides. Go ahead to the population slide. As you know, population's going up. Tony's already alluded to that. 2016, the estimated population, 167,000 people. That's almost a 5% increase in the last 2 years. And I'll start off by saying, first off, thank you for that 10%, because at this time last year, I don't think we had anybody on our application process being ready to be hired. Right now, I just talked to my HR director. We have 60 people on the list. We just hired some from FHP. We've got other agencies that are applying, officers from other agencies applying to us to be hired, because they know that this is a great place to work, and they know our county commission cares about us, and so they want to be here. So that's a great testimony to that 10% you guys gave us, and we appreciate it. The next slide, you'll see dispatch calls for service. When population goes up, obviously everything else does too. If you notice, we've got almost 12,000 more calls for service in 2015 to 16, and so far this year we're up to 74,121 as of June. So we're going to break that 2016. We're estimating we'll probably have 165 to 170,000 calls for service this year. So as I said, with population growth, everything goes up, including calls for service. And then the next slide, the agency arrests. 2015, we arrested 5,228, and in 2016, we arrested 5,829, a 601 person increase. And then from January to July of 2017, we're at 3,625. So we're on tap to break the 7,000 mark on arrests this year. And that's 11.5% increase from 15 to 16, so it'll be even more than that when we get to 2017. And arrest types, you see, drug arrests are the thing. And one of my positions I was asking for was 2 narcotics officers. Right now, our narcotics division, we have 5 detectives for a county with 167,000 people, and there's no way to be proactive with 4 people. When I had the unit back, I was the corporal over the unit back in the 90s, we had a sergeant, a corporal, and 10 investigators. And then the budget tanked, and we had to make cuts in certain areas, and that was one of the ones. Well, now with heroin and methamphetamine and just general marijuana arrests, everything's up 32%. And then on the next page, you'll see the increase in homicides, which obviously, I think most of those were domestic violence related. You can't prevent those. You can't, keep a husband from killing a wife. Unfortunately, I wish we could, but that's the majority of the homicides. And you see pretty much across the board, crime's up. And if you go to calls for service by priority types, this is a scary one. If you notice on the left, in-progress calls are up 19%. And in-progress calls can be anything from a shoplifting in progress to a store robbery in progress. Those are the dangerous ones. Those are the ones that put my officers in the most jeopardy, and it's up 19%. So that's an extra 4,881 in-progress calls we had over a 1-year time period. A total of 25,192 in 2000, or 30,073 in 2016. And then I broke it down also by calls for service by district. All the districts are up. The biggest increase is in Milton, 14%, and the total calls for 2016, around 150,000. And then next, narcotics. As we discussed earlier, if you notice, the scariest part of this is the second line. Guns seized, up 325%. So the drug dealers are I guess, better armed than they were back in the day. A lot of them are carrying guns. We're seizing a lot of guns. And this is, the top part is just the narcotics unit. This is just those 4 or 5 detectives that work narcotics that did all that. And then you go down to the bottom, total narcotics arrests by Santa Rosa County, and there's 808 in 2016. And as of June, we're almost on tap for a 1,200 drug arrest in 2017, which would put it up 50%. And then next, the types of call for service at school locations. The one you need to look at is police assists, which is up 18%. That's where officers actually had to respond to the schools for different kind of violations, whether it be a fight or anything, that they deemed that law enforcement should respond to. And then the next one, school resource issues. Back in 08, 09, we had 14 officers. Elementary schools, we had 2 DARE officers. All the middle schools had officers. And then, of course, in 09, 10, that went down to 5, to where they're just in the high schools. I asked for 2 positions for school resource. I wanted to put them at King Middle and Holly Navarre Middle. The calls for service, and you see 57 and 97, and you're thinking during a school year that's not that much. But some of them involve weapons, some of them involve other things. So you have to remember, if you have a resource officer on campus, the response time obviously goes to almost 0, whereas you have to call an officer off the street to come to the school if there's not one working there. So the response time can be 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, depending on what the officer's doing when the call comes out. And another thing that resource officers do, and as a former resource officer in the middle schools, I can tell you, you catch them before they get their mind made up in high school about law enforcement. You get that positive impact on their life, and they know that every time they see a law enforcement officer, it's not bad. That's another thing that, you actually make better citizens, I believe, when you have resource officers in the schools. Now we go to detention. In our jail, we have 5 separate housing areas, and if you look down at the current jail overtime, projected total $911,500, that's enough to pay for the salary of 16 officers. But yet we're paying it in overtime right now because we're so short back in the jail. We currently have 17 deputies per shift, and each shift, just to cover the vacancies and cover all the pods, we need 23. So that's where that overtime's coming. If somebody calls in sick, we have nobody else. We have to call in somebody. We have no coverage. If somebody gets injured and they have to go to the hospital, we don't have coverage for that. And the jail capacity, max capacity is 682 inmates, and you'll see that number again here shortly. It's the total number of authorized beds minus medical and confinement, because we don't count that, because medical, obviously, you want to keep as many of those open as possible in case an inmate gets injured. We can put them in medical. We don't like housing them in medical for that reason. And the next one, dangerous incidents in the jail. If the real scary ones at the very bottom, 106 dangerous contraband incidents in 2015-16. In 2016-17, that went up to 276. And that's a 160% increase. And dangerous contraband incidents can be a lot of things. It can be where they file down a toothbrush or whatever to make it a stabbing object, anything like that. But that's a lot. 276 contraband seizures, that's pretty scary. And detention intakes, 2015-16, total number for the year was 9,239. So right now, as of June 17 for this year, we're over the 10,000 mark, almost 11,000. So, and we still have all of July to count for. All of August and September, and July and August are our busy months. That's when we get the most prisoners coming in. And then federal custody inmates. You see there, which generates revenue, so we definitely don't complain about it. It's we have 388 for the last year. It's a 25% increase, which, you know, it is good to get the money, but also, you know, we have to deal with them. We have to deal with their medical issues. We have to deal with them fighting. We have to deal with their contraband issues. So we do make money off it, but it can be trouble for us at times as well. Average inmate population, back when we had Escambia, and we averaged 100 a month with Escambia's females, we were at 633. 2016-17, without the inmates, 638 is what we're averaging. And I cannot tell you why that is, other than we're just arresting more people, and it's getting a lot busier. And then if you see down there, you remember that number from our current beds. Our current daily inmate population as of yesterday was 682. We're full. And also back with that 633 from Escambia, that was minus, we had 8 detention deputies from Escambia County that they sent over to take care of their people. So we don't have them anymore as well. Work release program, I've been getting some emails from some of you guys about, I guess there's some people concerned that we're closing it, but the reason we're closing it is it averages $136,500 in lost revenue a year, and I just can't sustain that. It's a great program. It gets guys out to where they work and everything, but the $136,000 we're losing a year, I just can't afford to keep it going. So that's why I've decided to stop the work release program. And I know from some of the emails I got, it makes it sound like I wanted to get rid of it. I don't. Anything that helps inmates to get out there, get a job, and not come back to my jail, I'm all for it. But it has to be financially responsible on my part. I can't justify, you know, using losing $136,000, you know, every year on a program that's, you know, not making money for the county. And then the personnel request, jail staffing request, we initially wanted 8, and then Tony asked me to cut it down, so I talked to my jail major. We cut it down to 6, and that would get us up to 19 sworn detention deputies on a day shift and 18 on a night shift. And we have less on a night shift because less happens on a night shift. Most of them are sleeping, hopefully anyways. And then civilian staffing positions, we asked for 1 civilian in offender registration, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, 1 civilian in IT, and 1 civilian call taker. The offender registration position, we have 1 person. She's responsible for all the registration of all sex offenders, predators, career offenders, criminal registrants, and juvenile arrestees. So she's the only one. So when she's out sick or she has to take a vacation or something like that, stuff backs up, because ACR has to handle it, and they're busy enough at taking in prisoners. It takes about 30 minutes to register a sex offender, and during that time, she's also answering phones, she's doing some other stuff, so it gets pretty busy back there. And especially when you look at, in 2016, there were 346 registrations, and so far in 2017, there's 379. So it's going up exponentially, and she's working a lot, and she needs a little bit of relief. And as you can see down the bottom, she averages 23 phone calls a day. That's intermixed with her registering the sex offenders. And IT, the IT position, our IT position provides support for 500 systems and 450 end users across multiple agencies. Approximately 200 are mobile, the MCTs in the cars, and they need 24/7 support. If something goes down at 2 in the morning, we have to call them out. And daytime operations, we have 2 technicians, and 2 technicians for mobile and 2 technicians for the regular. And then at night and weekend, we're supported by 2 technicians, and that's for patrol dispatch and the jail. So that's a lot of computers to take care of. And the call taker position, we average 146 calls per day per call taker. And you say in an 8-hour period, that doesn't sound like a whole bunch, but they're also entering all that information. When they get a phone call, they're typing in the information they're giving, and then they're sending it to the correct dispatcher to dispatch the call. So there's a lot more than just answering the phone with it. And they answer the 911 calls, and they enter everything into the computer. So right now, we currently have 2, and we want to go to 3. And then for law enforcement, I originally asked for 8 deputy sheriffs. We cut it to 6. The 2 narcotics officers and 2 school resource officers, those I just feel we need to start staffing those positions. And I know we have 8 middle schools, and these 2 seem like a drop in the bucket, but we've got to start somewhere. And I talked to Mr. Rosdick. He said he financially cannot support us at all right now. He pays for our high school resource officers. He pays their salary 9 months a year, and then we pay it 3 months a year during the summer. He said he cannot do that for any more positions, so this would be totally funded by the sheriff's office if y'all could see your way to give us the money for that. And the narcotics officers, as we've already talked about, they're definitely overworked and understaffed. So, all right, last one. Right now, we're on tap to give you, and I think this is a conservative estimate, $500,000 back this year, according to my CFO. If things keep going on the same, I guess, even keel that it's going on, knock wood, you should get at least $500,000 back from us this year. And I'm trying to be as financially responsible as I can, which obviously that leaves more money at the end of the year for me to give back to you guys, because we do appreciate the raise. And I know I'm putting you in a predicament asking for these positions. I know it's a hard thing to come up with money, especially with what's looming on the horizon. But I can tell you this, I've never seen crime like it is now, and it scares me. And I've been in this business 35 years, and it's getting worse. And I would love to have a proactive rather than reactive agency. But right now, that's just not the way it is. And if we don't get our staffing up, I don't know where we're going to be heading. And I can tell you that 10% raise, now we actually have people to choose from, which is a great thing. Wendell Hall didn't ask for any positions last year, and I asked him why not. He said, well, let's say they gave us 8 positions. There's nobody to hire. So your 10% you gave us has created a surplus for us to choose from. And I don't think we've ever had that since I've been here. So thank you very much for your time. Do you have any questions for me before I sit down?
Open it to the board for any questions of the sheriff. Commissioner Sullivan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you all for the great job you do. Thank you to our public
Yes, sir.
for seeing the need, especially on law enforcement, for that half-cent sales tax.
Yes, sir. I agree 100%.
And I believe that majority of the people voted for it based on safety, public safety, law enforcement. So
Yes, sir.
I want to thank our citizens for finally seeing that you can only do so much with so little, and we have to have a dedicated source of revenue.
Yes, sir.
Couple of questions.
Sure.
In your presentation, you were talking about the positions that you initially wanted, but after talking to Tony, you cut them down to XXX.
Yes, sir.
Are those funded? Are they going to be funded in the budget?
No, sir. As I said before, I think they took 750 to 800,000 out of what I requested. So no, sir, they wouldn't be funded. Now, he did leave, I want to say Tony left an amount in there to where I probably could put two deputies on the extra deputies, I should say, positions. But no, these aren't funded as of now.
Commissioner, what we did beyond the raise, beyond the 1.6 million that was included in that the board already approved, and the 100,000 for the rest of their employees to receive a merit increase, was we plugged in 600,000 to be at the sheriff's discretion, and I'm talking about above FY17. So the 600,000 would be for him to determine whether he puts that in personnel or puts it in something else.
Hold on one second. That 600,000,
In other words, we didn't designate you hire this person or that position, or we didn't designate which positions or anything else.
Right, but what is that? Can we use all 600,000 positions or no?
Yep, it's still only positions total.
When you look at the budget, you see that, if you look at the budget document, you'll see that we just placed that amount in basically in reserve for contingencies. We didn't assign it in their budget, we just put it there for them to determine where it's plugged in.
See if you, the net cut is.
Tony, give me a page number on that, please, sir.
146.
Cut is my favorite.
Right, okay.
Is that
I
in
got you.
Appendix A, or is that the main budget?
That's your tentative budget, 146 in the tentative, not in the appendix.
So if I'm understanding Debbie right, that 800,000 that is not funded, that's after the 600. So we would be able to use about 280,000? 280,000 for personnel, which would get us probably two deputies and a call taker or a IT person.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple more questions, and I'll be quiet. Going back to your jail staffing request,
Yes, sir.
you said that after negotiations, you had requested 6 new positions.
Yes, sir.
Earlier, you talked about the amount of overtime that you were spending.
Yes, sir.
Shouldn't those 6 new positions almost be a wash if you can reduce your overtime?
Yes, sir. If I get these new positions, once we get them hired and in place, yeah, the jail overtime will be cut drastically.
Okay, so it's almost a wash.
Right,
Okay.
right. It would be cut down drastically. I'm not saying that we're not going to have overtime. We always have that, injuries and things like that, but it wouldn't be 911,000, that's for sure.
The other world I came from, I understand when you reach a certain level of overtime, it's more cost-effective, just go ahead and hire somebody.
Exactly. Yes, sir. And that's where we're at.
One last question.
Yes, sir.
The $500,000 you're talking about possibly giving back to the county at the end of the year,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gomillion, is that built into our budget, or can that be used to go toward that 800,000?
It could.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Share my questions, and thank every one of you for what you do all the time. The reason we can put together that nice video that shows all the niceties of Santa Rosa County is because you folks, emergency services and people, look at the ugly end of it. And thank you for what you do. I'm real happy we did the 10%, and that you now have people to make some selections from and can,
Yes, sir.
get, and these same people are people you can place in the jail they're applicants for law enforcement, so they can.
And detention, both. Yes, sir.
Okay. Sheriff, on the basis we're on as far as, what we're looking at down the road, where we're going to now. I think the, board has been, good as we should do. We advertised that half-cent sales tax for safety, law enforcement, emergency services and stuff like that. I feel like, with the 500,000 that Commissioner Salter mentioned and you mentioned earlier, I don't see us getting to that 800,000 target for you, but maybe we got some middle of the road there that, you could work with the county administrator on the next few weeks before we settle on the budget and come up with something. One thing I would suggest doing, and this has always been a stickler for me, and I've talked to Mr. Rosdick about it, is school resource. Well, he throws it at me that the safety of the citizens is up to the Board of County Commissioners, but my argument is that the safety of those children when they're in his schools is up to him. And we all know the legislature doesn't hold the school boards accountable like they do the Board of Commissioners. So to press him a little harder for some assistance, just like the unions are having to press him a little harder for some raises for teachers that also are well deserving of the raises. I'll support you on that, but I'd support you even stronger if you'll lean on Mr. Rosdick a little harder for that, because, again, I think that's something that should be a school board function, or at least a little more buy-in from the school board.
Yes, sir. I'll talk to him again.
Anything else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lynch.
Sheriff, thanks for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
And all the information that you've brought forward. It's real helpful to us as we're trying to make budget decisions and prioritize things. And I think for us, for your department, for all of the constitutional officers, prioritization of funding is going to be key over the next few years. If the additional homestead exemption passes, as everybody sort of feels that it will, it's hard to not vote for a tax break. It's going to cost the county close to $4 million a year in tax revenue, and that's general fund money that we can use for operating expenses. So we do have to really hone in over this budget cycle and the next couple on what our priorities are, what we see the role and function of local government. And I think law enforcement, public safety obviously is key. It's key to the economic success of our county. It's key to the quality of life of our county. And that's the reason that Santa Rosa County has grown by leaps and bounds over the last 20 years. We're a safe place to live. Quality of life is very high. On the school resource officers, I've supported that since 2008 when I was first elected. I remember talking about that in my first budget meeting. If there's any way that we can beef up that program, I'm all for it. 2 is better than 0 in my mind. What would the officers cost? Do you have a figure for those 2 positions?
Yes, sir. A ballpark cost on a new officer, fully equipped, all benefits, everything's around $57,000 for an officer.
Okay. Well, I would like to see us work towards funding that, and regardless of whether the school board should participate in that funding,
Yes,
I think the writing's clear that they're not going to be able to. So that's going to fall to the Board of County Commissioners and you and your budgeting. So I'll work with you to try to find some way to fund those resource officer programs. Obviously, all of the officers that you've requested, I understand how important that is, and we don't have enough officers on the street during each shift, and hopefully we can get there. But I'd like to work with you on those resource officers and see if there's a way we can make that happen.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Commissioner Parker.
Had a couple questions. A few of them had eluded me, but just to reiterate, I appreciate, obviously, every man and woman that'll go out there and wear the uniform to do the job, but kind of a lighter note question. Did you get the dispatchers their raise yet?
They're going to get this step raise that all county employees are getting.
Right. I was going to say, I hope that's taken care of. So,
Yeah, it better be, right?
I've said before, and I can't help but reiterate, obviously we're kind of the safe parish in between the 2 counties as the other commissioners, and have alluded to and what the Home Builders Association presentation stated, this is the county of choice for many people. I don't feel that the people are coming here because our millage rate's 1.6 mills lower than Escambia County. I feel that they're coming here primarily, a lot of the young families, because of the school system. And all I can do is take Mr. Rosdick at his word that they're being crippled, basically. They can't keep up. The diminishing returns the growth has far outpaced them. So I take him at his word on that. And I definitely don't have a doubt that you're in the same situation. I think the unfortunate issue with this is everybody in the community, except for probably most of the bad guys, support the sheriff's deputies. The bad thing is it's, as I said in the last time you were here, sort of a subsidy program. We're pumping money at so that our great, valiant men and women can deal with the bottom dredges of our society. There's no other way to put it. That's why y'all have jobs, is because we're saying now there's more bad people in our neighborhood. And if we add the more narcotics investigators, I definitely would assume next year narcotics arrests would be increased. Therefore, more people in the jail, therefore more need of jail personnel. And that's just, I guess, the perpetuation cycle that I wanted to make sure we were all aware of, is that I do not, obviously I strongly support you. I'm going to support you through this budget process. I guess just maybe even for my own thing to throw out there, and I believe you'll agree, we're not going to buy our way out of this problem. We can give him more deputies, they'll arrest more people, we'll need more money, and I think it's going to be imperative that we support the sheriff as he works with, probably starting with the legislators down to, judges and courts officials. We need to do something. Obviously, I'm not the Supreme Court, and I can't overrule that we need to have prayer and Bible reading back in school, but we need to do whatever legally our legislators will allow, and I guess that's kind of what I'm encouraging here on this, is if we don't implement programs to make it, whether it be harsher punishment or, like you said, catch them at the younger age, or do something to deter this crime. I feel like I can sort of speak from experience from a neighboring county. Throwing more money and more deputies does not solve our crime rate. It just simply keeps them housed in that AC jail versus in the houses out here. So I kind of say that just as a hope on behalf of the citizens, myself and my family members included, that pay property taxes so that y'all can deal with these criminals, is that we're doing something to try to deter them. And I understand the school resource being a big part of it, but I just thought that was important that our eyes are wide open. As we arrest more people, we're going to need more detention officers. And I think from what Commissioner Salter stated, with the kind of where he was alluding with the 500,000 and then the 750,000 in jail overtime, I know, like you said, there'll always be some overtime, but if we looked at the $57,000 per deputy cost and we took 10 deputies, 570, so we're still at about 180,000 worth of overtime. Of course, I will go off of Sheriff Morgan's statement yesterday on the video. I'm not going to pretend to tell you how to run it better than the sheriff knows how. Those are concerns sort of as just a humble taxpayer here in the county, is that unfortunately you let me know, and I hope the rest of the board know, if we need to take trips to Tallahassee or with the Sheriff's Union on what we can do for anything creative to support this other than throwing money at it, I'll support you on it. As Commissioner Cole stated, I think it's great we did the 10%. It's terrific to hear that now you're bringing state troopers and other people over. So if we give you everything that's requested this year, do you have any sort of anticipation of what the request would be next year? Do you think you'd be able to toe the line next year, or
Well,
a nominal increase?
you have to understand, and I understand what you're saying when you say throwing money at the problem, but here in Santa Rosa County, we've been kicking a can down the road for a long time when it comes to staffing. Now we have an opportunity to fix some of that. And it's not just throwing money at it, it's what's going to happen if we don't hire deputies is what I'm looking at. Because right now, as I said before, we're proactive, or we can't be proactive, we're reactive. That's what we do. We answer calls because we don't have a street crimes unit. We don't have enough people. We don't have a big narcotics unit that could double as a street crimes unit. We don't have the people. So I understand throwing money at it is one way to put it, but putting deputies on the street, I think it's money well spent. And I think, you know, we're at 1.1 officer per thousand. State average is 2.7. I mean, we're not even halfway there. So when you say throwing money at it, I kind of, you know, it is putting money into something, but it's putting it into protection of the citizens, which I think as a government entity, I think we'll all agree is our first priority, is to protect our constituents. And I swore an oath to do that. And I'm just telling you guys, and I know I'm putting you in a tough predicament. I get that. I am. I understand this is a huge request, but I would be remiss if I did not tell you what I needed to keep the citizens safe. And that's why next year, if I got everything, if you said, hey, we're going to approve everything and boom, you're good to go, would there be a personnel request next year? Yes, there would be, by all means, because you've got 8 middle schools. We're going to hit 2 this year. I'd love to get 1 more per year or something like that if we could afford it. The narcotics unit needs to be effective, they need to have 10 investigators. We've got half that. It is what it is. So I'm not going to say, hey, if you give me what I'm asking for now, you won't see me requesting people next year. No, I'll be back in front of you. It's the nature of the beast. The population's going up, and it's been going up, but our staffing has not been going up. And now we're at a point where we've got to do something.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sullivan.
we keep talking about if the citizens approve the additional $25,000 homestead exemption.
Yes, sir.
That's something this board's going to have to deal with. We cannot sit back and take a $4 million hit
Sure.
and expect to provide the same services that we provide now.
Right.
So that's going to be, just want to make sure our citizens understand, somebody's going to have to pay,
Right.
one way or the other. So we'll deal with that when that time comes.
Yes, sir.
One thing I'd like to see county administrator definitely do is to definitely work with you on the 6 new detention officers versus that overtime cost.
Yes, sir.
See what that really looks like,
Okay.
if it's a wash. And I'd definitely like to see that $500,000 possibly be dedicated back to your budget. And how would that help offset that $800,000 delta that you're looking at?
Well, and I think, and I'm not a budget guy. My CFO will tell you I am not a budget guy. But if I give you back, let's say, and I think we're projected, and she may kill me later, but I think it'll probably be closer to 750 than it will be 500. But my question is this: come October, how do we facilitate that? If I call Tony and I say, hey, Tony, it's going to be 750,000, I'm giving it back to you. We're wanting to use that for personnel. So it's not exactly a steady reoccurring fund, so I don't know how that works.
Yes, and I can answer that. I mean, that certainly is the pitfall, if you will, of that, is hopefully, and I think, you know, historically, over time, we did, at one point, I believe, the county did anticipate some of that and did program that into budgets. We did not do that this year, and maybe the prior, I'm not sure, but at any rate, because there had been some history, I think one reason we didn't do it, there had been a history of the sheriff coming and saying, hey, I'm going to give you back X, can I get it back?
Right.
And buy cars with it. Well, we don't have that issue anymore.
Right.
We've got another source of funding there, so I think that it's reasonable maybe to expect some level of return.
Sure.
I would think. And so, but I think that's a good point. I think the 500 is not reoccurring absolute.
Right.
It's not like knowing that our millage rate is this and it's going to generate X the next year as well. So that is a good point. Let me, if you don't mind, while I've got the mic, just one other thing. I mean, I think I hear where kind of we're going here, and let me just make sure so I'm not trying to jump ahead of the board, but Sheriff, I believe we talked about the detention overtime. I believe you have, and Debbie I know has the number, but I believe total overtime across the agency is probably 1.6, 1.8 appropriated. So I'm assuming if there are hires in multiple departments, then there's a commensurate reduction in overtime in those as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Sheriff, then, would it be safe to assume, okay, if you're budgeting 1.6 to 1.8 for overtime, can you shift $1 million of that towards new hires and keep $500,000 in reserve for overtime? And we don't need to answer all that now. I think that's something that I'm hearing from the rest of this board. We may not hit that 800,000 mark this year. We know you're coming back next year, unless all of a sudden everybody decides to go to church next Sunday and change their ways. But that's going to happen. I mean, we're going to see an increase. I remember when this board authorized construction of the other pods, knowing we'd have excess, and they're already full. So I think you've heard from enough of the board members that we're giving instruction to the administrator. We want to see some increase, probably not going to hit your mark, but some increase, but also work a balance of where you're reducing the overtime and putting in positions. And then we supplement that with maybe some more positions, and we get close to that mark, maybe not hit it, but I think there's plenty of wiggle room right there for us to up the number of your forces, up the number of school resource officers, maybe not quite hit the 800,000 mark, but get rid of some of this overtime now, since you do have people standing in line wanting the jobs.
And also remember this, if you guys said, hey, here's 800,000, hire all 19 people, when it comes to the deputies in the jail and the deputies on the road, as soon as we hire them, from that point, the minute they raise their hand and I swear them in, they've got about 5 months before they're an active person by themselves in a patrol car or working by themselves on a shift in the jail. So it's not something, that overtime's not going to go away, October 2nd when we hire people.
Well, we need to be able to work with the county administrator,
Yes, sir.
fill in that, that void for those
Right.
many months, and get, even if we have to bring them on a few at a time. So
Right.
I feel pretty certain the county administrator has direction from the board at this point that, we're going to raise the ante a little bit here.
And thank you very much for that. And I appreciate all you do for the agency. I really do. I know it's like Commissioner Parker said, I'm like one of his kids. Every time I show up, I'm asking for money. But it's just something I'm committed to. I swore an oath to protect the people of Santa Rosa County. I'm going to do the best job I can, and whatever you guys can give me, I appreciate it, and thank you for the support.
And I thank you, and I believe the board feels the same way. We can converse with our agencies, with everybody.
Yes, sir.
We've seen on newscasts where other communities aren't able to do quite as good a job. So
Yes, sir. And I can tell you, my people feel the support from the board, and yeah, I think we get along a little better than some other county commissioners.
Hey, one other note, because he called me out, though. Just
ahead.
like the kids, I give him money every time he comes, asks for it. So sometimes I just throttle him back a little bit.
Yeah, and I still come back anyways, right?
there you go.
All right, thank y'all.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for coming out today. So,
Mr. Chairman, just so that I'm clear where you want me to go, the sheriff's office and I would get together, or our offices would get together, talk through their anticipated carry forward, talk through reduction in overtime, develop the best plan we can to find a balance in there and see what that tells us, and then communicate back with you where we are And if we need to take any other action, then I think we can determine that. Is that what you'd like for me to do?
I'm thinking I'm getting nods all up and down the board, so we're not going to try to micromanage this as far as
Okay.
who hires where, what, but I'll leave that up to you two.
Okay, thank you. I think we understand. I believe next up will be the clerk's office, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Mr. Spencer, you have the mic.
We're gonna have to hire you some more folks and down at the courthouse when they started arresting more people with the new deputies, aren't we?
Dan, you got it up. Good morning. How's everyone doing this morning? Good to see everybody. I really appreciate the board taking time out to listen to the constitutional officers on their budgets and how we're doing in the county this past year, and it looks like what's coming in next year. The mission of the clerk of the court and comptroller for Santa Rosa County is to serve our citizens, the courts, and the Board of County Commissioners with the highest standard of accountability, integrity, ethics, honesty, and professionalism. And we will accomplish this by putting quality and customer service first by maintaining complete and accurate records of our county. This past year, the clerk and comptroller, which also serves as a financial officer and treasurer and auditor of Santa Rosa County, we paid 52,619 vendors a total of over $113 million. We had over 17,000, almost 18,000 journal entries. We issued 22,023 receipts for over 121 million, almost $122 million. We processed 8,321 payrolls for a total of $34,486,916. We also manage the county's investments, which we have approximately $80,278,349 in our investments. We billed 34,067 customers for a total of $10,526,966 last year. Also, Santa Rosa County was awarded the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Government Financial Officers Association for the 13th consecutive year. Y'all may not really realize how important that is. There's a lot of clerk's offices in the states that don't get this honor. This shows how accurate and how well we do our accounting procedures in Santa Rosa County. On our board support, our employees took 657 pages of minutes from the board. They handled 29 petitions for the Value Adjustment Board petitions. Our internal auditor performed 11 audits and over 100 guardianship audits that were performed. That duty was written into law a couple years ago for us to monitor the guardianships. Some counties have developed auditor generals in their office. At this present time, we're just staying with our internal auditor to do this. Our courier drove approximately 13,153 miles last year. This shows the refunds that the clerk's office has given back to the BOCC on the appropriations of excess recording fees in the finance department. Last year was a little over $200,000. The clerk this year anticipates returning approximately $500,000 to the Board of County Commissioners after we asked for the $127,950 back for the step increase. So we're anticipating more than $500,000. This is what we're anticipating it's going to be right around there after we ask back for that $127,000. That will be used for down payment on the property that the board put the bid in on, the courthouse. So that pays almost 60% of it right there. Last year, our budget was $1,942,998. We're asking for this year $1,998,913. This increase is related to the merit increase, the increase in FRS rates that was approved in July of 2017. There's approximately $4,200 requested from the board for the system maintenance on our purchasing card program. Our purchasing card program began about the middle of fiscal year 2015. To date, the clerk's office has extended $21,976 for software to integrate the purchasing card program with our accounting software. We've generated $54,922 in miscellaneous general revenue funds since beginning the program. The expected maintenance costs are expected to be approximately $4,200 for fiscal year 2017-18, and that is adjusted annually by an inflation factor. Revenue are expected to be at least $50,000, if not more, for fiscal year 2017-2018. So that investment is kicking good. I mean, it's paying off good.
Donnie, would you want to take a question now, or do you want to wait till the end of your presentation? Would you want to take a question now, or do you want to wait till the end of your presentation? And the only thing my question would be is a purchasing card.
You could ask now. We got questions.
Okay, all right. We're good. Next question. Explain the purchasing card, just.
There's a rebate that we get back from SunTrust for the county purchasing cards that our employees use. They give us a rebate back on it. And they approached us about this and that we could possibly generate revenue on it, but we had to buy the software program and get that going. So every time our county employees use that rebate, that purchasing card, we get a rebate back to the county from SunTrust. How SunTrust is doing it, I don't really know, but it's we're making money on it. And it's only going to cost us about $4,200 a year for the maintenance agreement now that we've got it all set up. So,
And I just wanted that on record for citizens that may be watching that and understand.
it's,
a little bit. Thank you.
it's an excellent program. It's a moneymaker for the county that's not costing us hardly anything.
All right, I'll open the floor now to questions. Any questions from board members? Commissioner Parker?
Thank you. Mr. Spencer, I was just going to say I appreciate it. Everything I've heard, we all have room to improve, but I've heard you've made some huge strides since going in and looking back at some of the previous budget things and talking with you about the purchasing card, as Mr. Cole had stated, has been terrific. And it's just, I want to tell you as a citizen, extremely appreciative of efforts that, especially ones I'm aware of, I know like you and our esteemed property appraiser have done to sort of mitigate those costs. And I mean, just like the numbers show, you're operating with the same number of folks, and I know your workload's going up. So I appreciate the job you do, and please let your employees know that not only do we appreciate it as commissioners, but just as citizens and taxpayers, because I think, like I said, yourself and other constitutional officers, I believe you and the supervisor of election and appraiser's office, this would be, at least just from what we have in front of us, the third year in a row that you're providing level of service without increased personnel. So just please carry that back as just a very humble citizen and servant, and we appreciate what they do for, obviously they're taking on more of a workload.
I appreciate that. Also, it looks like our county is turning around because our recordings funds have started increasing again, and that's why the amount of funds that we're going to be able to return this year will be whole lot higher than it was last year. It looks like things are finally starting to turn around again. Let's just hope it keeps going. I know they're building all over the county. We haven't signed as many plats as I would like to during the budget year, but construction is going on, and people are reselling houses. They're going in and they're starting to flip houses. That's generating money for the county. They're generating these homes that they can fix up for people that can pay for a $100,000 home. They can buy those homes as these people fixing up. So that's keeping the revenue coming in through the dock stamps and the filing fees.
All right, any further questions? All right. Mr. Spencer, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, next up is our property appraiser, Mr. Brown. How are you today?
Commissioner Salter, let me clarify, steam, that means old.
Hey, could I interrupt you just a second?
I noticed you and Commissioner Lynch are just snapped your neck over there looking at me, so.
Mr. Brown, if you give me just a second on special request, I'd like to, if you will give me just a minute. Dan, if we could, there's something I wanted to do this, but he didn't let us add items to the agenda when we had a crowd in the Channel 3 News here. But I just, if you will give me just a moment, I'm not going to ask the other fellas to lead us, although I've heard that Tony's got a good,
Can I walk
singing
outside?
voice. But
Yeah, I've heard some of y'all sing.
hey, I tell you what,
I think I'm happy about this.
your office staff,
Set me up, didn't they?
no, I want to say from the bottom of their heart, they really do. They appreciate you. They talk terrific about you. Honestly, I can't take the credit. Your staff wanted to make sure that you were publicly recognized. We appreciate you being here and serving the county on your birthday. I did the same thing 2 weeks ago. But all jokes aside, Mr. Brown, from the things I have seen out of his office, as far as numerous things with creating software, and again, a lot of this, he'll be quick to tell you, he may have an idea or a vision, but their staff has been tremendous on generating revenue, holding the line with even a reduction in personnel. And, you know, I'm probably a bit biased towards his office because his first year in the gate, he started a program to allow students to come and work part-time. I was able to work in that program for a year, and I feel like that was instrumental in exposing me to sort of the heart of service, which is why all of us get into elected office. So I think you're doing a terrific job. You're right up there with my absolute favorite constitutional officer. I can't tell you if you're my favorite or not because I may make somebody else mad. But anyhow, I appreciate what you do. Really, your staff wanted you to know they appreciate you, and thank you for your service. So happy birthday.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate
With
it.
that, thank you for your presentation. We appreciate you coming out today. I just wonder where they got that very, very much younger picture of you to put on here today.
Commissioner Salter and I will not release where we have our photos photoshopped. So I'm going to modify our first president's quote, and if you'll allow me to put on my spectacles, I have not only gone gray and bald and nearly blind in service to my country and county. So I will start my presentation if we can get that loaded. One thing is we're going to have to get a bigger screen because Bubba and I are going to move closer next year up under that screen. Yeah, reserve a spot over here for us because I couldn't see the two previous, no offense, the Honorable Clerk, but I was having a tough time. So let's see if I can get this right. Okay. 2016, we had $8.4 billion in taxable value and revenue of $51 million.
And in 17, we have 8.8 billion. So using last year's millage rate, it's going to be revenue of $53,673,000, or an estimated increase in county taxable dollars of taxable value, of nearly 400 million, and nearly 2.4 million in revenue at the current millage rate, or about a 4.75% increase. The next slide is affectionately known by me as the Salter slide. This is the difference between the county and the school revenue, difference in exemptions, and I left a couple out, and I'll mention those towards the end, Commissioner Salter, but that gap is going to get wider probably, and we'll talk about that. So this year, talking about my budget last year and this year, actual budget increase of about $95,000, or about a 3%. And the primary reasons are the step increase that you so graciously allowed our county employees, FICA, the retirement rate, state payout, which are all uncontrolled costs, and my increase in cost in legal fees and computer maintenance are our primary increases this year. Net budget change since I took office in 2001, and Commissioner Parker, not only is this my birthday, but it's my 17th anniversary of doing a budget presentation. Commissioner Salter instituted that in his first term in office, where constitutionals got to come and give the public information on all of our budgets. And so I've had about a 2.4% average increase over the last 16 years of presenting a budget. 2001, I had 34 budgeted positions with one student. I have 32 budgeted positions with a part-time, and the program you mentioned, Commissioner Parker, part-time students. And so we're still operating at full-time staffing levels less than when I took office. Non-recognized revenue is work that we do on MSBUs. We also began the homestead investigation, fraud investigations, or I call them improper investigations. Liens to date, it's over $1 million, and we've collected over 900,000 of those. And each year we find homesteads that are not proper and go ahead and remove those, which keeps about $5 million on the tax roll. Unused budget funds since 2001, I've returned over $3 million, or an average about $203,000 a year. And as you can see, annualized savings with the unbudgeted, and we include the MSBUs on our trims, homestead liens, so that is about $300,000 a year. That also includes licensing fees that we get from other counties that we've copyrighted our software for different applications. For our homestead exemption, tangible personal property, our field collection devices, and we license those to other counties and receive a small revenue back on those, which also led, and I'm going to take a moment to praise my staff, is that our office won, again, as you all know, the International Award for Distinguished Assessment Jurisdiction, which was a high honor, and my staff deserves that credit. As you can see, the additional homestead exemption that is up for vote in 2018 will affect 27,000 of the 43,000 homesteads we have. So 63% of the homestead properties will receive up to $152 in savings. That's contingent upon voter approval. How that works, I try to make it simple for me, is that the first 25,000 of an exemption, say this property was 150,000, the first 25 is exempt. property owners pay on the next 25. The third tier, the third 25,000, they pay, they're exempt from. The fourth 25,000 they'll pay on, and this fifth exemption, or this new exemption, will affect anything between $100,000 and $125,000. And initially, it was for the fourth 25,000, which would have been a much, much greater number, because some properties are less than $100,000, so it would have taken in a higher number. So the estimated loss in taxable value is $748 million in today's value, and the number Commissioner Chi mentioned was almost $4 million. It's actually $4.5 million. The good news is we were up 4.5%, and probably next year, hopefully, we'll go up. And so by 2019, you'll be exactly where you are today, time that exemption rolls around. I will just jump on my bandwagon a little bit that the legislature, in all their infinite wisdom, has again hurt not all the counties in the state, but Santa Rosa County. We have a $68 million solar array field going in on 399. There's only 3 counties, and they're affected in basically mostly in this district, Escambia, Santa Rosa, and Okaloosa, that meets the statutory requirement of being on federal property, that they would receive an exemption of 80%. So the $68 million that was coming on the tax roll will now reduce down. They will get a $54 million exemption off that $68 million that the legislature voted through, that just affects us, our 3 counties. The other thing that the legislature passed was a bill that affects privatizing of federal military property for housing, and gave a clawback that they can go back from basically the inception to pay them back. Even though the company that is privatizing most of them is a British company, they have a much larger lobby than apparently Florida Association of Counties has when it comes to solar and these type exemptions. So these exemptions are awarded, and that comes down to you guys trying to find the money to replace that. So we need to watch what the legislature does on a yearly basis to how it affects you guys and us as citizens. With that, I will tell you the projected loss on that voting will be almost 8.5% of the ad valorem tax that you will receive in 2019. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try and answer them.
Craig, I do have a couple of questions. You lost me on 2 things. If the federal property is where these solar fields are going.
The solar fields are 2 different ones, but it is on federal property. But initially, we dealt with that company and estimating the tangible personal property. They're considering it tangible personal property at $68 million, which would have been taxable. But the legislature this year passed a bill that gives them an 80% exemption on that tangible personal property that resides on federal property. The other solar fields may be on privately owned property, or maybe one of the power company properties, but it's a third party that is building these solar arrays, and they generate the energy and they sell it to the utility, and then they pass it on to us. But if it resides on a military installation, then they get an 80% exemption.
Okay. And then the other thing was the tiers you showed us on the homestead exemption. I thought, forgive me for being ignorant on this, I thought, you got a $25,000 homestead exemption and that was it. I didn't, and then if we get a new one, that'd be again. But You lost me on the tiering there.
At the time, Governor Chris, if you will recall, gave or got passed a second exemption, which was for the, I call it the third 25,000, if you put them in 25,000 blocks. So your first 25,000 is exempt. The second 25,000 is taxable. The third is exempt from county tax only, not school tax, because if you reduce the school tax, then the legislature's got to find their money to offset that loss in revenue, not the school district. And so if you notice a lot of these bills that the legislature passed, that they're reducing taxes to the taxpayer are not on the school side, only on the county side, so it only affects the county commissioner's revenue. And so this new proposed one will be for the 25,000 between 100 and 125. If your value is 110,000, you would only get 10,000 in exemption, not the, everybody says, well, I get another 25. No.
Okay.
You get anything over 100,000 up to 125,000.
Thank you. That helps me.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Salt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brown. You're not getting older, you're experiencing youth deficiency,
Okay.
as we all are.
That's what esteem means, right?
Couple of questions. And I know you've given us this number before, but how many dwellings in Santa Rosa County pay absolutely no ad valorem taxes based on that first 25,000?
Commissioner, I'll have to run that number and get it back to you. We've done that before, but it's kind of a small number. As I recall, it's like 0.6% way back when, but let me get that number and I'll be happy to give it to you.
But there are those who pay nothing.
I believe that's correct.
Right. Second question, just for clarification, on the military housing, and I know that's become a very complicated issue over time, especially when the military privatized that housing. And I think y'all got it worked out, but how do you determine the difference between active duty military living in military housing and a DOD contractor civilian living in military housing as far as paying taxes?
They provided us a list, and initially what I did was any of the active duty personnel that was living in the housing, then we exempted it. The DOD, the retired civilians, we actually have a large number of civilians living in our military housing complex. We would put those out on a taxable basis. So each year it would change based on active duty, those that are DOD or retired or civilians, then those would be taxable because the statute said actually active duty. The way the new law is, they're all exempt. Everybody's exempt. And so, they're all exempt.
So if I'm a civilian living in a military housing complex, I'm exempt?
Yeah, it's a legislative kind of thing. You'd have to be in the legislature maybe to fully understand that, but
Never mind.
yeah, that's the way it is. If you're a civilian and you live in on the military property and the military housing, then you're also exempt. And that was from the lobby that they got that law passed. So plus they are trying to claw back all the way back, I believe, 2007 when they initiated the privatization. And so the legislature said any taxes that you may have paid in the past, you get to recover those. It's incredible.
Sounds like something Nancy Pelosi had come up with. Can't say. Well, I'll throw this in there too. Since privatization, having children that are in military and in military housing, they do a lousy job with it too. Terrible job. With the quality of the upkeep and everything of the housing. So.
Those are just two examples of, and that's why the gap, the Salter gap will be more, a slide next year will have a wider gap. So.
Greg, just for clarity, on the referendum, it will impact your assessment for calendar year 2019, correct?
That's correct. It'll be voted on in 18, and the implementation day will be January 1st, 19.
Which would impact our FY 20.
1920, correct.
Greg, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you very much. Thanks, Commissioners, and your staff. Thank you, Commissioner. Even my former, attorney that y'all took from me.
Many happy returns. All right, this time we have our supervisor of elections.
Everybody left, but I'm staying for captain. Don stayed, he kind of has to stay.
Is it on? Okay. I probably don't need a microphone, but good morning. Thank you guys for having us this morning. Happy birthday to Greg. He's always a hard act to follow, but this morning it will even be harder. But anyway, so our 2017-2018 proposed budget, basically I want to start with a mission statement. It's to ensure the integrity of the elections process while providing impartial voting, securing the accuracy of all votes, while guaranteeing voters are treated with dignity and respect. Staff came up with this a couple of years ago, and I think they did a great job in putting into words what we do. Operating expenses for this upcoming year, most of them are related to the primary election, which will be held on August the 28th. With the exception of ballots, because ballots we have to pay for the primary election and also the general election in this next budget year due to our military deadline of the 45 days prior to the election. And I just put a caveat in there about ballots because I have budgeted just a regular ballot for the general election. Regular meaning we call it a one page. That can be one ballot page front and back, is usually what we see in a general election. However, we all know that the Constitution Review Committee is currently meeting and reviewing things that could potentially be amendments, additional amendments on that general election ballot. So we could very well end up with possibly a two-page or even longer ballot. And we saw that in 2012. So just wanted to put that in there. I have not budgeted for more than a one-page ballot because we simply don't know at this time. And unfortunately probably won't know until late spring or early summer what the general election ballot will look for. But I may be back if I see that we're going to have a longer ballot because it will cost additional money. The only outlay, capital outlay request is our van. You guys all know our van is very old. It's limped along, especially the past couple of years. But I'm hoping that either through this or through the LOST money that we'll be able to get a dependable van to use, in transporting equipment, training, going to the south end, that sort of thing. So mine is pretty short and sweet today. Do you guys have any questions?
Commissioner Parker?
I already guaranteed her we were giving her the van. I know we had when we put it on the tentative FY18 budget, and we got talking one day, and I said, we already voted to give you the van. But do you have any idea how much it would be if they had a two-page ballot, to where if maybe, personally, I would feel better on knowing to be able to give Tony to where we could make sure we had that cushion built in, because you could always do a give it back, or we could put it in contingency somewhere?
At this point in time, based on the costs that are current, if we had to add an additional page, it would be about $50,000.
Okay, I think, so I'm sure Tony can make sure we've got
We
that.
will have a line for a reserve for contingencies, and so I don't think, assuming we have a typical change, I don't see that as something that we wouldn't be prepared for.
Thank you. And I just personally say, I know you guys on this board have been through far more than me, but I got a taste of the canvassing board this year. She said it doesn't count. because it was the J election, but just say for the record for the citizens, they go through an awful lot more than you would think, and we didn't, based on their mission statement, detect any interference or hacking or anything like that. So I appreciate the job you do too, as well as I told Mr. Spencer and Mr. Brown, and operating, I actually believe now you're operating with less personnel than you were the previous years prior to this past year. So I appreciate you toeing the line for the citizens.
Thank you.
Commissioner Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tappy, thank you very much. I'm not sure what Commissioner Parker was talking about serving on the canvassing board, because I think the alternate spent more time than.
Mr. Salter, I believe I heard a volunteer for nomination for the next canvassing
I
board.
totally
Commissioner
agree.
Salter, you had to serve at Phyllis's request. So,
I was going to say I'd be amiss if I didn't say this. I was disappointed that Phyllis didn't show up to kind of back you up, so.
I
kinda
know.
work
I
on
think
that.
you scared her away a couple of years ago.
Anybody else? Tappy, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Tell your mama we said hello. All right, at this time, we've got some time reserved for our great tax collector, and hopefully, since he's not here, he's out collecting all them taxes and too busy to be here, so.
Yeah, I believe actually he might have had a reduction, did he? It was the same.
We over budgeted a little bit last year. We over budgeted a little bit last year, and based on my calculations, the number that we have this year should be fine.
Well, Stanley and his group do a fine job, and as do all the county employees. They do all the heavy lifting and make the Board of Commissioners look good, and we appreciate that. So if there's no other comments or questions this morning, we'll recess now till our afternoon meeting, which will be at 1:30. That'll be a budget workshop for all board departments.